Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Jameson Files. I'm Carrie Weber, and I'll be your host today. And I am honored and thrilled to have with us as our guest today Dr. Cathy Jameson, our founder here at Jameson, and my mom.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
When we first launched this podcast, we knew one of the first ones we wanted to do were episodes with you and with Dr. John, obviously. To not really just talk about where things began, but to talk about the continuation of those foundations that you started 30 years ago that continue to be so powerful and relevant for doctors and teams and practices today.
Great.
So for all of you listening, today what I really want to talk about is leadership.
Okay.
And I know that's a broad topic. That is a very broad topic. So I want to just focus in on it with you because I know you have such a heart for leadership in dentistry. And you got your master's in psychology. You have your bachelor's in elementary education, master's in psychology, and you went on some years ago to get your PhD in leadership. And I wanted to ask you, at that time, you'd already been working in dental practices, working with doctors and teams for some time. What was it that led you to choose leadership as such a focus of your attention, your study, based upon the work that you were doing at the time?
It's a good question. After spending so many years in practices, helping practices thrive,
Right.
we have based everything that we do on good communication. No matter what the role is of a person in a practice, how they communicate makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
But I was working and continuing to work in practices all over the country, in fact, all over the world, I saw a single thread that really ran through successful practices, or on the flip side of that, practices that had problems moving forward. And it was either the ability to lead or the inability to lead. And in my opinion, everyone in a practice is a leader.
Right.
We are, first of all, leaders of ourselves, and so people decide how they're going to approach every day. They decide how they're going to handle their care of patients. They actually decide also how well they're going to interact with one another. So those three issues become very important to the success of a practice. Making a decision to thrive in your own right, to continue your education, to bring a good attitude to work, to really do all that people expect and perhaps a little bit more every single day.
Right.
And then the team becomes so critical. People working well together. A dental practice is so intricately coordinated, one person coordinating with another, that if one person isn't functioning at their utmost, that's going to affect other people through the practice.
Right.
So again, the systems are intricately related, so are the people. So I really believe that each team member is also not only a leader of themselves, but they're a leader of each team member, their teammates.
Right.
So that, again, if you were looking at the definition of accountability is, in two words, clear expectation. So a team member needs to have clear expectation about what they are supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, when they're supposed to do it. And when they fulfill those expectations, then the next person can coordinate with that and know, I'm going to be able to count on him or her to do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. That means I'm going to be able to do that too. So there's a huge leadership piece in learning to be a leader of teammates. And then certainly last but not least is being a leader of patients. So I tell people this, and it's true. You can't, nor would you want to ever push a patient into making a decision. Couldn't, even if we wanted to.
Right.
In fact, that'll just push people away. But we can lead patients to making decisions, hopefully good ones, good decisions that lead them to make a decision to go ahead with the treatment that the doctor is recommending, or the hygienist, or whoever it may be. So as I worked with practices and saw these threads of the call for leadership and the need for leadership, the practices that get that and study the skills of leadership and integrate those skills into their practices thrive. And the ones who don't either stay the same, or they may have some growth, but they're not maximizing their potential. I suppose over the years, if you were to ask anyone that's ever worked with us and anybody who's ever been in a practice consulting, one of our coaches, advisors is their consulting, if I asked all of them, what do you think is the most important thing that makes a difference as to whether a practice thrives under our guidance or not, it would be leadership. So,
and speaking to that, and we laughed a little at the beginning saying it's such a broad topic. But interestingly, at the time this is being recorded, we are preparing for one of our leadership sessions that you lead several times a year for Jameson. And we always ask doctors and team leaders that are coming, questions before they arrive in terms of what elements of leadership are they hoping to work on in those 2 days with you. So between that and the work you've done consistently over the years on the focus of leadership, are there some particular areas or gaps in leadership that you see consistently? Maybe accountability is one of them or lack thereof. But are there 2 or 3 that if people that are listening are really wanting to take a good hard look at themselves as leaders and where they could be better, chances are they could focus on one of a few areas? Are there some that you see on the regular?
I do, but you make a very good point. There are so many different aspects of leadership. Each one is critical. Each one is so valuable. But leadership is a set of skills, and because they are skills, they can be learned. So I want people to take heart, and if they think, oh, I'm just not a good leader, well, everyone has the potential to be a leader. It really has nothing to do with personality.
Right.
There's different personalities of different leaders. It's more the intention. It's more the intention and the commitment to being a continuous learner and developing those skills throughout time. The accountability is a big issue.
Yeah.
So accountability, number one, is clear expectations about what somebody's supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, when they're supposed to do it. But what a lot of people leave off in terms of clear expectations is, what are the expected end results that I am to obtain in my position in practice? So there's some disappointment sometimes on the part of a doctor, let's say, of a member of a team. This is an example. They may not feel like that person's fulfilling their role effectively.
Right.
But if you look back and peel the layers and say, well, were they really clear on what they were supposed to do?
Yes.
Had you provided the training that they needed to be able to excel? Did they have the tools that they need? And perhaps most importantly, did they understand why what they're doing is so important to the whole? There's no role, there's no responsibility, there's no big job or little job. Everything is so critical to the whole. But it's the why behind it that motivates people. So if the doctors, let's say, in this example I'm using, this would be true for anybody, but this example, the doctor understood that and really invested time, money, energy, and effort into that continuous development of their team. The bottom line is, as each person on the team becomes more productive, and if you pool all that increased individual productivity, the practice is going to thrive. It can't help but thrive. The other thing that's interesting in the research about today's person in the workplace, this has probably been always true, but certainly it has bubbled up to be a vital part of a happy person and a thriving person in the workplace today. Right. The people in the workplace today want to be challenged. They want to continue their education. They want to stretch. They want to be a part of what's going on. They want to be a part of writing goals and designing plans of action and being a part of a project, not just being told what to do and then just thrown into the wind to do it, but rather to be an active part of it. That's very exciting to me. That, to me, is a great practice or a great organization when everyone on the team wants to participate. They want to give to the whole. They want to see the practice thrive in this example. In fact, a talented person, which of course that's what you want on your team, is talented people, but a talented person will leave an organization if they are not challenged. Challenged, and then the other part of that is that people want and need to be rewarded for work well done. And I'm not talking about money. Right. There's a place for money. There's no question. People have to put food on the table and a roof over their head. There's a place for money. But the research has shown emphatically that a person wants more than anything else to be appreciated, to be recognized, to be valued, and to be appreciated for their contribution to the whole. And people will leave an organization if they feel unappreciated much more quickly than they'll leave the organization to make more money down the street. So that's also a skill for some people. Some people it comes naturally to express appreciation. Some people have to be taught how to do that.
Well, and I think within that, all around revolving around accountability, you stated several leadership elements that it obviously shows that one builds upon another, upon another, because you spoke about clarity of vision. If a doctor or a leader isn't clear on what their own vision or expectations of practice performance or systems performance or team performance are, how can you ever, how can the team ever excel when nobody knows what they're working on?
So true.
And setting of expectations, communication skills. Right. Because communicating that vision and those expectations, and you taught me this, and you speak to this a lot, that assumption is the lowest form of communication. Right. And if you out there as leaders are struggling with a system or with a team member or whatever it may be in your practice, if you were assuming that things were being done a certain way but it was never communicated, or the team member may be assuming they're performing just fine or they're doing it right because no one told them otherwise, or you may be assuming things are happening a certain way and they're actually not. But the communication isn't taking place. So how interesting that so many pieces of leadership build up together to form what can provide effective accountability, really, and confidence in holding people accountable and holding each other accountable. Can we count on each other to do what needs to be done in the way that it needs to be done? And
really, that's what trust is. Trust is being able to count on people to do what they say they'll do when they say they'll do it, and so on.
Right.
It's very difficult to build trust. It's very easy to break a trust, and almost impossible. Can be done, but very difficult, let me put it that way, to rebuild trust. So that's where the more open the lines of communication, the more steady the feedback, and those we want a horizontal style of leadership where there are open lines of communication where people feel like they can go to the owner, the CEO, the dentist, let's say, and say, this could be better, we're having problems here,
right.
And not feel frightened to do that, but realize that while, let's say if somebody came to me, I might not agree with them necessarily, but I want to be respectful to listen to their point of view, and I might learn a lot. So again, the communication, which ties into feedback. Sometimes leaders think, oh, well, people don't need feedback. If I don't tell them they're doing a bad job, they should just assume that they're doing a good job. Well, that's just not true.
Yeah.
That's just not true. In fact, with a human being, no feedback at all or no reinforcement, let's put it that way. No reinforcement is connoted by a human being as negative reinforcement. So when we can understand the inner workings of a human being and integrate an appreciation, respect, and understanding of human nature, we understand, no, we all need feedback. Whether we need to be developing something that we are not doing well, I want to know that so I can improve. But also, if I'm doing things really well, or just steadfastly and consistently, and you can count on me, a little recognition for that and acknowledgement of that is very valuable.
So let's say that there are people that need to be a little more cognizant of showing appreciation or of setting those expectations and making sure they're creating that environment that is healthy, just like your book, Creating a Healthy Work Environment, states. You and I both have been studying James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, something that he says, that you need to do tiny changes to shift. He went deep into habits.
Yes.
But it was great because we felt a lot of sense of, oh, yes, that's exactly what we think.
That's right.
That, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And these elements of leadership really are processes within ourselves to keep our leadership intact and keep our team performing it the way that we want them to. Are there certain, as these doctors and leaders try to create better habits of leadership, are there certain triggers that they could set for themselves, like Mr. Clear says, to set those triggers, make it easy for yourself to remember to do these disciplines?
It's a day-to-day thing. It's an everyday thing. So if a doctor, let's say that the doctor was studying delegation.
Right.
And which is a wonderful aspect, a very creative and productive part of a practice or any business, is to, number one, nurture the talent of the people that are there, discover those talents,
Right.
nurture those talents, and then provide the training and development for individuals, and then trust them with the delegation of those responsibilities.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in any business, you want to do the things that only you can do and delegate the other things to people who are qualified and who want to do them. It's a very difficult thing for some people to do. So I'm just using that as an example. So let's say that what we teach a lesson where we have people write down what they do in their position, and then we rate them 1 through 5. Not that everything they do isn't important. Everything they do is important. So it's not about importance, but what are the things that are most productive for the organization? And then rate them 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. And the ones being the most productive, the things that they're doing that are the most productive for the organization. Ideally, when you look at that across a practice, let's say, you would define what are the things that people are doing individually that are the most productive for the practice that person can handle and handle well. So that's a place where a doctor could start. Now, you want to focus on the 1s, 2s, and 3s. The 4s and 5s, while important, I ask people to look at them and say, could we refine this and do this more efficiently? Okay, great. That would give us time to spend more time, give us the opportunity to spend more time on the 1s, 2s, and 3s. Could this be outsourced? Would it be more cost effective actually for us to outsource this so that the people on the team could focus on the things that are ultimately productive for the practice? It's a very good thing to do. Number 3 is, could something be delegated? Could it be delegated to someone within the practice, or maybe without, but within, to somebody who has the desire to do that, the talent and the wherewithal to do that? And really, you look at their plate and say, what's on their plate? Could they accept this? Or do we need to take something off their plate to accept this and elevate their own capabilities and opportunities within the practice? So this whole concept of delegation might be a place where a doctor wants to start.
Right.
And that exercise that I just gave you, while it sounds complex, it's really not, but it's so vital. Ultimately, what you want people to do, to repeat, is to do the things that only they can do, or the things that they do the best, or that they love the most and they can put the most energy into. And again, the results of delegation are going to be accelerated and improved productivity, and actually a lot more joy and fulfillment for the people in the practice. So that's an example of a critical part of leadership, one phase of it, and exercise to determine are the things that could be delegated. Sometimes doctors hesitate to delegate to people. They just don't realize the talent that's right there in their own practices.
Right.
People have asked me over the years what's kept me on the road doing what I'm doing for so long, and I said, it's seeing someone that may not have even realized their own potential or their own talent or their own capabilities, and to see them thrive and become more than even they imagined. And so for me, that's been my greatest driving force.
Right.
And I think for a practitioner as well, when a doctor sees the people in his or her practice become more than they even imagined possible, it's so fulfilling and rewarding, and it becomes the glue that keeps the practice together and a team thriving.
So accountability, delegation, and I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in terms of what, in my opinion, is probably one of the top 3 important pieces to work on as a leader, and that's communication.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the other 2 aren't successful unless you do have the skills of communication. How does a person, if they're watching, say, my team's not engaged, or I don't know who I would delegate something to if I could.
Right.
I don't know if anybody would want to do anything else, because they're. I even spoke to somebody recently that they just said, our team, they're showing up, but they're not really there.
Yep.
We're having to start from scratch. in terms of engaging the team and involving the team. What would you recommend would be a healthy first step if someone listening said, okay, this is it. I'm drawing the line in the sand. We're going to change the culture of this practice. We're going to hold each other accountable. I want to delegate more and empower more people, and I want them to engage in that with me. What would you recommend that they do to begin that process?
We do say here at Jameson that communication is the bottom line to your success, and I believe that with all my heart, whether it's with the relationships with the team or whether it's certainly it's relationships with the patients, as I was indicating earlier. So, and communication is a set of skills.
Right.
You've got to have a pretty good attitude. You've got to want to communicate well, there's no question.
Right.
But if somebody can see the value and the benefit of improving communication, then a study of communication skills. I'm a big fan of and have studied many years with Thomas Gordon and his work in effectiveness training, and that while he is no longer with us, his organization and team is with us. Marvelous communication skills. There are other places to go to actually study or read about or have a workshop in your own practice, because you were referring back to us asking people that were coming to leadership what they wanted most, what their goals for leadership are, and almost everyone, if they're listing 3 or 4 goals or whatever they may list, communication skills are always in there. And I really respect and appreciate that, because you're right. No matter what we're doing, how we communicate makes all the difference in the world. So even though it may not be natural for people, even though it may be stepping out of their comfort zone, a study of communication skills, and then slowly but surely the habit process. Start with listening, starting with the skills of listening, and learn to listen. Again, just because I listen to somebody doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with them, but it's my way of showing them I respect them. I want to hear. And perhaps I could open myself and learn a lot myself by listening to others. And when people realize that they're being listened to, they will be more willing to share. There's all kinds of things that can be learned from the people that are in the trenches, so to speak, if we just listen. And then learning how to speak in a positive, constructive way rather than a destructive way. Some people are so afraid of confrontation because we've never learned how to do that, and we mess things up. But confrontation, when it's handled skillfully and from a place of grace, can be a place where perhaps challenges can be resolved. And instead of having relationships separate, we can be stronger on the other side because we've discovered something that perhaps we have different points of view, or that maybe we even have a challenge with one another. But if we care enough to communicate about this, we can resolve it. On the other side of resolution of a problem, let's say, is a strengthening of the relationship. Once those relationships are strengthened and bonding occurs with people, they can almost get through anything. So I totally agree with you that communication skills are the bottom line to any success, whether it's of individuals or of the systems of a practice. And if there's ever going to be a breakup or a breakdown of relationships, it'll almost always be traced back to communication problems.
And don't you agree, in terms of all of us as leaders that are continuing to develop our communication skills, it isn't easy at first. No. Especially when there is emotion in it. It can be very challenging. But you may not be perfect at it. None of us are perfect at it, but it may be really difficult, just like you said at first. But I think most people can see that authentic intention, the intention for good, even as you're stumbling through it.
Exactly.
Don't you think that that's the case?
In fact, I often will recommend to people, if I've taught listening and speaking and conflict resolution and problem solving, I'll say, look, these are new skills. It's just like the first time you picked up a handpiece, you weren't comfortable with it. You had to practice. Habit, the development of habits once again. So if I had gone to a course in communication skills and I came back to my team, I might say to them, hey, I've gone to a new course. I'm not going to be great at this yet, and so bear with me. Right. But my purpose and my intention is to do a better job of communicating with each and every one of you, as well as with our patients. So I'm going to ask for your support, and I'm going to commit to you that I'm going to continue to work and study these skills, because what I want is for us to have great communication, and that will translate to great production. I had to say it.
There you have it, folks.
I had to say it. But
now available at jmsn.com.
As a matter of fact, it is. But also, the relationships will be so much healthier. So again, people feel like they're going to be vulnerable sometimes if they're honest. What happens most of the time is it's really not vulnerability, it's honesty. And there's a deepening of the relationship when there's an honest conversation that comes from your heart.
Right.
And you said something interesting a little while ago about communication can be emotional.
Yeah.
Well, all communication is emotional. In fact, all conversation, all communication is a combination of both content, whatever it is that you're saying, and the emotion behind it or within it. And we really can't separate the two.
No.
And so sometimes people say, oh, I don't like all this feeling stuff, or I don't want to talk about emotion. Well, all communication is a combination of content and emotion, so you never will separate it. And so it's might as well wrap your arms around that.
Well, and like it or not,
Yeah.
you've entered a profession that there's a lot of emotion
Yeah.
because you're dealing with your patient's health and well-being, and so you are in the midst of emotion all
Exactly.
the time. So
Yeah.
best to work on how to navigate that emotion in the most effective and healthy way possible.
I really think that people can listen their way to case acceptance. If we really give
Me too.
ourselves our attention 100% to a patient and we ask questions and really open ourselves up and listen, there's all kinds of things to be discovered. And when a patient is listened to, or a team member,
Right.
they feel valued,
Right.
and the relationship is enhanced. So it's all about, instead of just talking and telling, it's really all about listening.
Right. So accountability, delegation, communication. For those listening that want to take a step forward in any of those areas, what are some hard questions for them to ask themselves to get started? Kind of maybe some guiding questions, so to speak, of a little homework.
Yeah, a little homework. Well, I think it starts with, first of all, I would encourage somebody to say, where do you believe you are doing a good job leading yourself, your
Right.
teammates, and patients? I would start in the positive. Where do you really feel like your strengths are?
Yes.
Now, I always want people to start with their strengths, but also, and pat themselves on the back internally, or pat themselves internally for, this is good, this is going well, I feel like I've really made some progress here. This is a strength. It's okay to do that. But then ask the more productive question, that is, how can I do everything that I'm doing a little bit better?
Yes.
And then the second part of that is to say, are there areas of the practice where I would like to set goals as a leader myself? Again, no matter what the role in the practice, what areas would I like to see enhanced? What areas do I feel like could be improved upon related to leadership? Could I be a better communicator? Am I delegating effectively? Are people thriving in their roles? Am I supporting them as they are learning and growing and developing? Am I trusting, and can people trust me? People in the workplace today want to trust their executives, and the executives want to trust them.
Yes.
In a dental practice, I don't want the doctor to go back to the chair and have to worry about anything else that's going on in the practice. I want the practice so smoothly set up, the system set up so beautifully, people very beautifully trained and educated and developed in administering those systems, and then monitors in place where they can say, is this working or not? And then if it's not, to communicate that, but again in a healthy, effective way, not as a lambasting, but as these things are going well, great, let's keep on doing more of that. There's some things I believe we could do better. Let's put those out on the table and see where we can go to make things even better. Every single step of improvement in leadership will lead to enhanced relationships, and ultimately, and the research has proven, will translate to increased productivity for the practice.
We could go on and on and on, and I look forward to doing more episodes
Yeah,
with
great.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you
You're welcome.
for your continued study of what is such an impactful and integral part of our careers, those of us that lead, find ourselves in positions of leadership, or as you said, are looking to lead from within, whatever position we have in our careers. Your study and your education to help us refine and learn skills to be better is making such a positive impact. So thank you.
It does. You're very welcome. And ultimately, it will lead to healthier, happier lives.
Yes.
In the practice and out.
I look forward to another episode with you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
You're
if you'd
welcome.
like to follow Cathy, you can find her blog at cathyjameson.com. You can also find her books on the Jameson website at jmsn.com. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.